Before I start this unbelievable story, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss a single moment of this emotional journey. What would you do if your own family plotted against you? Stay with me because this story will shock you. I still remember the afternoon like it was yesterday. The sunlight filtered through the lace curtains of my living room, casting soft patterns on the worn wooden floor. I was sitting in my favorite rocking chair, knitting a sweater for my grandson, Jamie. He had always been a sweet, curious boy, always tugging at my sleeve, asking endless questions about life, about everything. That day, he was unusually quiet. Jamie's small frame shuffled nervously as he climbed onto the couch across from me. His big brown eyes seemed heavier than usual, weighted with a worry no child his age should carry. "Grandma," he whispered, clutching his favorite blue blanket, I heard Mom and Dad planning something about your money." I froze mid-stitch. My hands trembled slightly, and the needles clicked against each other in an uneven rhythm. I wanted to tell him it was probably a misunderstanding, that children sometimes mishear things, but the seriousness in his eyes stopped me. There was no panic, just an honest, scared curiosity that demanded truth. "Jamie, what exactly did you hear?" I asked softly, lowering my voice to match his whisper. He swallowed hard, his tiny hands fidgeting with the edge of his blanket. "I was in the hallway last night. I couldn't sleep, and I heard them talking. Mom said we should start moving things to the new account, and Dad said it's almost time. Grandma, are they trying to take your money?" My heart sank. It was a question I had always feared, but never imagined hearing from an 11-year-old. I reached over and pulled him close, wrapping my arms around him. "Oh, Jamie, let's not jump to conclusions. Sometimes grown-ups talk about things that sound serious, but they're not what we think." He shook his head, pressing his forehead against mine. "No, Grandma, I heard them. I heard it all. Please, you have to do something." I hugged him tighter, my mind racing. I had always been cautious with my finances, keeping most of my money in a separate account only I could access. But lately, I had been trusting my son and daughter-in-law a little more. They visited often, helped me with errands, and I thought I was lucky to have family I could rely on. The thought that they might have sinister intentions made my chest tighten. I spent the rest of that afternoon talking gently to Jamie, asking him to recall every single word he had overheard. Each phrase he repeated made my stomach twist in knots. "They said it's almost time," he had said. That one line kept echoing in my mind, like a warning bell I couldn't ignore. That evening, I tried to distract myself by cooking Jamie's favorite macaroni and cheese. He was unusually quiet at dinner, poking at his food, lost in thought. I kept glancing at him, trying to offer reassurance with my eyes, but he avoided mine. I realized then that he had taken on a weight far too heavy for a child. After dinner, I told him to go brush his teeth and get ready for bed. When he left the kitchen, I closed the door behind him and sank into my chair, my hands trembling as I held my tea mug. What if Jamie was right? What if my own family, the people I had trusted most in this world, were planning to betray me? Sleep did not come that night. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening for any sound that might hint at truth or deception. The house felt different, heavier, like it held secrets I was only beginning to uncover. My mind wandered through every conversation, every small act of kindness from my family over the past months, questioning each one. The next morning, I decided I needed to act carefully. Confronting them directly could risk exposing Jamie as the one who had overheard them, and I couldn't bear for him to be caught in the middle. Instead, I planned to take discreet steps, small actions that would allow me to protect myself while gathering information. First, I checked my accounts. Thankfully, everything seemed untouched. The separate account I had carefully hidden remained secure, and no transfers had been made. But that didn't ease the knot in my chest. It only confirmed that my suspicion could be accurate. They were planning, waiting for the right moment. Over the next few days, I began observing their behavior more closely. My daughter-in-law started asking questions about my investments. My son casually mentioned my savings, always in passing, always testing the waters. Jamie would glance at me occasionally, as if seeking reassurance that I was aware that I was planning my next move. One afternoon, I decided to take Jamie for a walk in the park to give him a sense of normalcy. As we strolled past the playground, I asked him gently, "Do you want to help me figure out what to do next?" His eyes lit up slightly, relief and hope flickering across his face. "Yes, Grandma," he whispered, "I want to help." We began a small plan. I told him we had to be careful, to observe without drawing attention. He was delighted to feel like a partner in a mission, and for the first time in days, I saw a spark of joy return to his eyes. We talked about ways to keep my money safe, ways to ask questions without revealing what we knew, and ways to look out for each other. That night, Jamie insisted on sleeping in my room. He curled up beside me, whispering, "Grandma, I'll stay with you. No one will take your money while I'm here." His words, innocent yet profound, made me realize how much he already understood about trust, betrayal, and the love between a grandparent and grandchild. The next few weeks were a careful dance. Every phone call, every casual visit from my family became a puzzle I had to solve. Jamie and I developed a quiet system. He would signal if he noticed anything suspicious, and I would take action behind the scenes. It was exhausting, but also strangely empowering. For the first time, I felt that I could protect myself and that I had someone I could trust completely. One evening, while reviewing some paperwork, I discovered something that made my heart stop. A small, seemingly insignificant document in the drawer hinted at a plan to transfer funds from my account to one I had never authorized. The handwriting looked familiar. The signature was unmistakable. My hands shook as I realized that Jamie's fears were not unfounded. The betrayal I had feared was real. I didn't panic. I couldn't. I took a deep breath, gathered the documents, and placed them in a safe spot. I looked at Jamie, who was reading quietly beside me, and whispered, "You are right, sweetheart. We need to be careful, but we're going to handle this." That night, I held him close, feeling the weight of responsibility, the sharp edge of fear, but also a deep protective love. I knew the days ahead would be challenging, filled with difficult choices and delicate maneuvers, but I also knew one thing. Together, we were stronger than anyone who tried to betray us. As I drifted off to sleep, I thought about the words Jamie had whispered so softly, the ones that had set this journey in motion. "Grandma, I heard Mom and Dad planning to take your money." Those words were terrifying, yes, but they were also the beginning of a bond that would see us through the storm, a bond that reminded me that family wasn't always defined by blood, by love, trust, and loyalty. The following morning, I woke before dawn, my mind restless with plans and possibilities. Jamie was already awake, sitting on the edge of my bed with his arms wrapped around his knees, staring at the window. The first light of the sun painted the sky in gentle shades of pink and gold, but it did nothing to ease the weight on my chest. "Good morning, Jamie," I whispered softly, trying to sound calm. "Did you sleep well?" He shook his head slowly, his eyes still clouded with worry. "I kept thinking about them, Grandma, about Mom and Dad. I don't know if they'll try it soon. I wish we could see what they're really planning." I smiled gently, brushing a stray lock of hair from his forehead. "We will, sweetheart, but we have to be smart. No sudden moves. Patience is our friend right now." Jamie nodded, though I could see the restlessness in his body. It was hard for an 11-year-old to understand the subtleties of deception, yet he had an uncanny awareness that sometimes surpassed adults. His intuition had been right from the beginning, and I could no longer ignore it. After breakfast, I set up a careful system in my home. Hidden cameras, subtle notes, a secure folder for all important documents. I treated it like a mission, and Jamie became my little partner in vigilance. We would review every call, every visit, every casual remark, and try to piece together their intentions without alarming them. Days passed like this, a quiet tension threading through every interaction. My son and daughter-in-law visited as usual, acting cheerful, unaware that every word and gesture was being analyzed. Jamie would sit quietly in the corner, pretending to read, while his sharp ears caught phrases that sent shivers down my spine. One afternoon, as I was preparing tea, Jamie tugged at my sleeve. "Grandma, I think they're talking about it again." I followed him to the living room and watched as he crept near the hallway, listening. Through the slightly ajar door, I could hear my son's voice, low and controlled, but unmistakably calculating. "It's almost time," he said. "We just need to be careful. She trusts us too much, but we can wait until she's distracted, maybe when she goes to the bank herself." My stomach dropped. Every word was exactly what Jamie had feared. I felt a surge of protectiveness, a fierce determination rising in me. These were my hard-earned savings, my security, and the betrayal came not from strangers, but from my own family. I turned to Jamie, whispering urgently, "Did you hear that? We need to be more careful than ever." He nodded, his small hands clenched into fists, eyes wide but resolute. Over the next week, I began to track every detail: bank statements, schedules, even their habits. I noticed small things that previously seemed innocent. My son always asking about errands I might need help with. My daughter-in-law curious about when I would visit the bank. Subtle probing about my accounts. It was like watching a puzzle slowly reveal its image, a picture of betrayal I never wanted to see. One evening, as I reviewed some paperwork in my study, Jamie sat beside me, his legs dangling from the chair. "Grandma, do you think they know we're watching?" he asked cautiously. I shook my head. "No, sweetheart. They think we trust them. That's why they're being careless. But we must stay quiet. If they realize we're aware, they might try to move faster, and we can't let that happen." He leaned his head against my shoulder, a silent gesture of comfort and trust. It was moments like these that reminded me why I had to stay strong, not just for myself, but for him. He had seen things no child should ever see, carried fears that would have crushed others, yet he remained brave, loyal, and determined. As the days grew longer, their visits became more frequent, and I started noticing the subtle manipulations. My son would casually suggest we consider transferring funds for safety, and my daughter-in-law would talk about investing in opportunities that required access to my accounts. They were testing, probing, waiting for a moment when I might let my guard down. One afternoon, Jamie and I were in the garden, pretending to tend to the flowers, when he tugged at my hand urgently. "Grandma, look," he whispered, pointing toward the window. Through the sheer curtains, we could see my son flipping through papers in the living room, glancing repeatedly toward the safe. His eyes lingered on it longer than they should. My heart pounded. The plan was moving faster than I expected. I grabbed Jamie's hand, guiding him back inside, and closed the blinds. "We need to act, but carefully," I murmured. That night, we devised a subtle trap. I created a dummy account, an imitation of the one they thought I had hidden, complete with fake balances and statements. Jamie helped me place small hints that suggested I was considering moving the funds soon. It was risky, but necessary. If they tried to access it, I would have proof without putting my real money at risk. Days passed, and tension hung in the air like a thick fog. Every smile, every casual question, every visit felt like a calculated maneuver. Jamie remained my little sentinel, his quiet observation catching details I might have missed. One evening, he tugged at my sleeve with urgency. "Grandma, they're planning to come tonight. They want to get the account when you're asleep." I felt a chill run down my spine. I looked at him, my heart full of both fear and pride. "Then we have to be ready, Jamie. We can't let them win. But we have to be smart. Remember our plan." We spent the evening preparing, setting subtle alarms, moving important documents to the safest corners of the house, and creating diversions. When the night finally came, I felt a strange mix of dread and determination. I would not allow my trust and love to be exploited, not by them, not ever. Around midnight, I heard the faintest creak of the front door. Jamie's hand found mine in the darkness, squeezing tightly. Through the shadows, I could see my son and daughter-in-law moving cautiously, unaware that we were awake, aware, prepared. My heart raced, adrenaline pumping through my veins, but I remained silent, letting them inch closer to their intended target. Jamie's small hand rested against my arm, a quiet reassurance. It was moments like these that reminded me why I had to stay strong, not just for myself, but for him. He had seen things no child should ever see, carried fears that would have crushed others, yet he remained brave, loyal, and determined. As the days grew longer, their visits became more frequent, and I started noticing the subtle manipulations. My son would casually suggest we consider transferring funds for safety, and my daughter-in-law would talk about investing in opportunities that required access to my accounts.
They were testing, probing, waiting for a moment when I might let my guard down. One afternoon, Jamie and I were in the garden, pretending to tend to the flowers, when he tugged at my hand urgently. "Grandma, look," he whispered, pointing toward the window. Through the sheer curtains, we could see my son flipping through papers in the living room, glancing repeatedly toward the safe. His eyes lingered on it longer than they should. My heart pounded. The plan was moving faster than I expected. I grabbed Jamie's hand, guiding him back inside, and closed the blinds. "We need to act, but carefully," I murmured. That night, we devised a subtle trap. I created a dummy account, an imitation of the one they thought I had hidden, complete with fake balances and statements. Jamie helped me place small hints that suggested I was considering moving the funds soon. It was risky, but necessary. If they tried to access it, I would have proof without putting my real money at risk. Days passed, and tension hung in the air like a thick fog. Every smile, every casual question, every visit felt like a calculated maneuver. Jamie remained my little sentinel, his quiet observation catching details I might have missed. One evening, he tugged at my sleeve with urgency. "Grandma, they're planning to come tonight. They want to get the account when you're asleep." I felt a chill run down my spine. I looked at him, my heart full of both fear and pride. "Then we have to be ready, Jamie. We can't let them win, but we have to be smart. Remember our plan." We spent the evening preparing, setting subtle alarms, moving important documents to the safest corners of the house, and creating diversions. When the night finally came, I felt a strange mix of dread and determination. I would not allow my trust and love to be exploited, not by them, not ever. Around midnight, I heard the faintest creak of the front door. Jamie's hand found mine in the darkness, squeezing tightly. Through the shadows, I could see my son and daughter-in-law moving cautiously, unaware that we were awake, aware, prepared. My heart raced, adrenaline pumping through my veins, but I remained silent, letting them inch closer to their intended target. Jamie's small hand rested against my arm, a quiet reassurance. Together, we watched, waited, and prepared to catch the betrayal in action. The tension in the room was almost unbearable, each second stretching into an eternity. This was the moment we had prepared for, the moment that would determine whether trust could survive or whether it would be shattered forever.
The house was quiet except for the faint ticking of the wall clock. Jamie and I stayed huddled in the study, listening intently as the intruders crept closer to my safe. Every step, every whispered word carried the weight of betrayal. I could feel my heart hammering in my chest, but I remained still, trusting our careful plan. They moved like shadows, my son's hand brushing over the papers I had set out as bait. His eyes scanned the room, calculating, while my daughter-in-law whispered encouragement, oblivious to the trap we had prepared. Jamie squeezed my hand, and I whispered back, "Stay calm, sweetheart. Watch and remember everything." Then came the moment I had been waiting for. My son reached toward the dummy account documents I had meticulously staged. I turned on the hidden camera, capturing every detail, every gesture, every incriminating look. My stomach churned with anger, but I forced myself to stay calm. I had proof now, undeniable proof, and I had to wait for the right moment to confront them. Jamie's eyes were wide, filled with a mix of fear and awe. "Grandma, they're really going to do it." I nodded, whispering, "Yes, but we're ready." I slowly emerged from the shadows, turning on the lights with a click that seemed deafening in the tense silence. My son and daughter-in-law froze, caught in the act, their faces a mixture of shock and guilt. "I believe you were planning to take what isn't yours," I said, my voice steady but filled with quiet fury. They stammered, trying to form excuses, but I raised my hand. "Don't. I have proof. Everything you said, everything you planned was recorded. I trusted you, and you betrayed that trust. I cannot allow this to continue." Jamie stepped forward, standing beside me, his small frame braver than I could have imagined. "You were going to take Grandma's money," he said firmly, "and I heard everything." My son's face fell, the guilt written in every line. My daughter-in-law looked down, tears forming in her eyes. The moment of confrontation was raw, exposing the cracks in our family that had been hidden behind smiles and polite conversations. I, I didn't mean, my son began, but I interrupted him. Intentions matter, and what you were planning is not acceptable. You need to understand that trust isn't given lightly, and when it's broken, it changes everything. I called my lawyer the next day to ensure that my accounts were secure and to discuss legal steps if necessary. But more importantly, I made a decision that my money, my security, would remain entirely under my control. Not for revenge, but to protect the bond I shared with Jamie, the only person who had stood by me with unwavering loyalty. Over the next few weeks, the family dynamic shifted. My son and daughter-in-law were distant, ashamed, and for the first time, fully aware of the consequences of their actions. Jamie and I spent our days quietly, rebuilding our sense of safety, tending to the garden, reading stories, and knitting together. Our bond had deepened in ways that went beyond the typical grandparent-grandchild relationship. One afternoon, as Jamie and I sat under the old oak tree in the backyard, he looked up at me and whispered, "Grandma, I'm glad we did it together. I was scared, but I knew we could handle it." I hugged him tightly, feeling the warmth of love that no betrayal could touch. "Me too, Jamie. You were my courage when I needed it most, and together we're stronger than anything." Time passed, and slowly the wounds of betrayal began to heal, not through forgiveness, but through careful distance and the unwavering bond between me and Jamie. I learned to cherish every quiet moment, every shared smile, and every whispered word of trust. And in the end, it wasn't the money that mattered. It was the love, the loyalty, and the courage to stand up against betrayal. Jamie and I had faced fear together, and we had emerged stronger, bound not by fear, but by the unbreakable threads of trust and love that would carry us forward for the rest of our lives. Even now, when I see him laughing in the garden or reading quietly by the window, I am reminded of that pivotal night, the night he whispered words that changed everything. "Grandma, I heard Mom and Dad planning to take your money." Those words, innocent yet profound, set in motion a story of courage, loyalty, and the realization that family isn't always defined by blood, but by those who truly stand by your side.